"Felix, stop! Where the hell are you going?" The words escaped Hyunjin's mouth, just as the apartment door clicked shut. For 3 seconds, the hallway remained completely still. Then Hyunjin heard footsteps. Soft. Careful. Too careful for someone. Simply taking out the trash at 2:17 in the morning. He stepped out of his room, barefoot, his dark hair falling messily over his eyes. The apartment was almost completely silent. Every light was off except the weak blue glow coming from the kitchen, painting the floor in cold shadows. Hyunjin stared at the closed door. Felix had been acting strangely for weeks. He had started disappearing after everyone went to sleep. At first, Hyunjin had assumed Felix simply needed some air. Then the disappearances became longer. 15 minutes, 30, sometimes almost 2 hours. Whenever anyone asked where he had been, Felix smiled. That smile had become the problem. It never reached his eyes. Tonight, Hyunjin had woken because he heard the faint sound of a zipper. He had opened his bedroom door just in time to see Felix standing near the entrance, dressed entirely in black, with a hood pulled over his blonde hair. Felix had frozen. Hyunjin had whispered his name, and Felix had walked out. Now Hyunjin grabbed his jacket. Something inside him insisted that he follow. He didn't know whether it was worry, suspicion, or simply the feeling that Felix was carrying something too heavy to carry alone. Outside, the night air struck his face. The city was almost empty. Streetlights stretched across the pavement like pale pools of water, and somewhere in the distance, a bus groaned through an intersection. The smell of rain lingered in the air, even though the pavement was dry. Hyunjin spotted Felix immediately. He was walking quickly, not toward the usual convenience store, not toward a cafe, not toward anywhere Hyunjin recognized. Hyunjin followed from a distance. Felix turned left. Hyunjin waited, then followed. Another corner, another narrow street. The farther they went, the quieter the city became. Hyunjin's heartbeat grew louder. "Felix!" He whispered the name to himself. The street eventually led toward an old building that looked abandoned. Its windows were dark. The paint on the walls had peeled away in long strips, exposing gray concrete underneath. A rusted metal gate hung slightly open. Felix stopped outside. Hyunjin ducked behind a parked car. Felix looked around. For one terrifying moment, Hyunjin thought he had been discovered. But Felix only pulled something from his pocket. A small silver key. He unlocked the gate. Hyunjin's stomach tightened. Felix had a key. That meant he had been here before. Many times. Felix disappeared through the entrance. Hyunjin waited until the gate stopped moving. Then he followed. Inside, the air smelled of dust, damp concrete, and something metallic. A narrow staircase descended into darkness. Hyunjin hesitated. Every sensible part of his mind told him to stop. But concern won. He descended. One step, then another. His fingers brushed the cold railing. Somewhere below, a door opened. Light spilled across the stairs. Hyunjin quickly pressed himself against the wall. He heard Felix speaking. His voice sounded different. Tired, almost broken. "I brought it," a man's voice answered. "You shouldn't have come alone." Hyunjin's breathing stopped. There was another person. He leaned forward carefully. Through the gap between the railing and the wall, he saw Felix standing in a dim room. Across from him stood a middle-aged man wearing a dark coat. Between them was a wooden table, and on that table was a large cardboard box. The man looked at Felix for a long moment. "Are you sure you're ready to know everything?" Felix lowered his eyes. "No." His fingers tightened around the edge of his sleeve. "But I'm tired of pretending nothing happened." Hyunjin's heart sank. What hadn't happened? The man slowly opened the box. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Hyunjin couldn't see every picture from where he stood, but he recognized something immediately. They were photographs of Felix. Felix at rehearsals. Felix leaving the company. Felix entering restaurants. Felix walking alone. Felix sleeping inside a van. Some had been taken from impossibly close distances. Hyunjin's skin prickled. Someone had been watching Felix. For how long? The man placed one final photograph on top of the others. Felix stared at it. His face went completely pale. Hyunjin couldn't see the picture. "That's impossible," Felix whispered. The man shook his head. "I wish it were." Felix picked up the photograph with trembling fingers. "Then why did they tell me he was gone?" The man's expression hardened. "Because they wanted you to believe he was." Hyunjin felt the world tilt beneath his feet. He almost stepped forward. Almost. Then Felix suddenly looked toward the staircase. Hyunjin froze. Their eyes didn't meet. Felix looked away. The man continued quietly. There's something else you need to know. What? The person who has been sending you those messages. He paused. Hyunjin could hear his own heartbeat. Isn't trying to hurt you. Felix's face changed. Then what do they want? The man looked toward the door. They want you to remember. A sound echoed from the corridor. Metal scraping against metal. Felix immediately turned. The man's expression changed. Someone followed you. Hyunjin's blood ran cold. He backed away from the staircase. Too late. A shadow moved at the end of the corridor. Felix rushed toward the door. Hyunjin? The sound of his voice hit harder than anything else. Hyunjin stepped into the light. Felix stopped. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Hyunjin looked at him. Felix looked back. There was fear in Felix's eyes. Not anger, not embarrassment. Fear. Why did you...
Follow me? Felix asked quietly. Hyunjin swallowed. Because you kept disappearing. Felix looked down. I didn't want you involved. You don't get to decide that alone. I had to. Why? Felix's eyes filled with something Hyunjin couldn't name. Regret, perhaps. Or grief. You wouldn't believe me. Try me. The room fell silent. The man slowly stepped away from the table. Felix closed his eyes. Then he whispered the sentence that changed everything. Hyunjin, someone has been trying to contact me for months. Hyunjin stared at him. Who? Felix opened his eyes. I don't know. Then how do you know they aren't dangerous? Because... Felix glanced at the photograph still trembling between his fingers. They know things about me that nobody should know. Hyunjin stepped closer. What things? Felix hesitated. Then he handed him the photograph. Hyunjin looked down. His breath caught. The photograph showed Felix standing outside the dormitory years earlier. But Felix wasn't alone. Beside him stood another figure. Someone Hyunjin recognized. Someone who should not have been there. Someone they had all believed had disappeared from their lives forever. Hyunjin slowly raised his eyes. Felix, I know. How? I found the first photograph 3 months ago. Felix's voice cracked. Then another appeared. He placed several photographs on the table. One every week. Hyunjin looked at them. Every photograph contained the same mysterious figure. Always somewhere in the background. Always watching. Always just far enough away to remain unidentified. But why didn't you tell us? Hyunjin asked. Felix's hands shook. Because the last time I told someone... He stopped. Hyunjin waited. Felix looked toward the floor. The next morning, they were gone. Silence. The man finally spoke. That is why Felix came here. Hyunjin turned toward him. To find answers? To find the truth. Felix looked at Hyunjin. And now you found it too. Hyunjin stared at the photographs. For the first time, he understood why Felix had been disappearing. He wasn't running away from them. He had been trying to protect them. Hyunjin stepped beside him. You should have told me. I was scared. I know. Felix looked at him. Hyunjin's voice softened. You don't have to be scared alone anymore. Felix's eyes glistened. For a moment, the darkness surrounding them seemed to disappear. Then the light suddenly went out. The room became completely black. Felix grabbed Hyunjin's wrist. A loud metallic bang came from the corridor. The man shouted something. Footsteps rushed toward them. Hyunjin instinctively pulled Felix behind him. Stay close. I am. Another sound followed. A door slammed somewhere upstairs. Then another. Someone was moving through the building. Fast. The emergency light flickered red. For half a second, Hyunjin saw a silhouette standing at the end of the corridor. Tall. Motionless. Watching them. Then the light went dark again. Felix's fingers tightened around Hyunjin's wrist. Hyunjin, I see them. The silhouette disappeared. Hyunjin turned toward Felix. Where's the man? Felix looked toward the table. The room was empty. The photographs remained scattered across the floor. And on top of them was a single handwritten note. Felix picked it up. His hands began to tremble. Hyunjin leaned closer. The message contained only 6 words. You were never supposed to remember him. Felix stared at the sentence. Then he looked at Hyunjin. And for the first time that night, Hyunjin realized the secret. Felix had been hiding wasn't really about someone following him. It was about a memory both of them had somehow lost. The note remained between Felix's fingers as if it were something alive. Hyunjin stared at the 6 words. You were never supposed to remember him. What does that mean? He whispered. Felix didn't answer. His eyes remained fixed on the handwriting. The emergency light above them flickered weakly, painting his face in alternating shades of red and darkness. Dust floated through the narrow beam, turning the air hazy. Felix, I've seen this handwriting before. Hyunjin's expression tightened. Where? Felix slowly lowered the note. In my dreams. Hyunjin said nothing. Felix gave a humorless laugh. I know how that sounds. It doesn't sound crazy. You don't even know what I'm talking about. Then tell me. Felix looked toward the empty doorway. For several seconds, he seemed unable to move. Then he walked toward the table and began gathering the photographs. We need to leave. Not until you tell me. Hyunjin? Felix. Their eyes met. The fear in Felix's expression made Hyunjin stop pushing. He understood that Felix wasn't refusing because he didn't trust him. He was refusing because saying the truth aloud might make it real. Felix shoved the photographs into the cardboard box. Take these. Hyunjin picked up the box. What about the man? He's gone. You don't sound surprised. I am. Felix looked at the corridor. But not as surprised as I should be. They climbed the stairs quickly. The building seemed even darker on the way out. Every creaking floorboard made Hyunjin glance over his shoulder. When they reached the street, cold air struck their faces. Felix immediately pulled his hood lower. Hyunjin walked beside him. Neither spoke. The city was beginning to wake. A delivery truck rumbled somewhere beyond the intersection. A convenience store sign buzzed in the distance. The smell of rain had grown stronger. Hyunjin finally broke the silence. Who is he? Felix stopped. I don't know. You said you recognized him. I recognize the face. That isn't the same thing. Felix looked down at his hands. No. Hyunjin waited. Felix's shoulders dropped. There was someone in my life before everything changed. Changed how?
Felix looked at him. You really don't remember? Hyunjin frowned. Remember what? Felix stared at him for several seconds. Then he whispered, That's what scares me. They continued walking. At the corner, Felix suddenly turned into a small alley. Hyunjin followed. Where are we going? Somewhere nobody will hear us. That doesn't make me feel better. It shouldn't. They eventually reached a quiet rooftop overlooking the city. Felix pushed open the metal door. Wind rushed over them. Below, the city stretched beneath a pale morning sky. Hyunjin placed the box on the ground. Tuck. Felix sat against the wall. For a long time, he watched the sunrise without speaking. Then he began. When we were trainees, there was someone who used to help me. Hyunjin sat beside him. Who? I don't remember his name. Hyunjin frowned. How can you remember someone but not his name? Because something happened. Felix's voice became quieter. One night, I woke up in a hospital. Hyunjin turned toward him. What? I was 17. Felix rubbed his thumb against his palm, an old nervous habit. I had no idea why I was there. Everyone told me I'd fainted. Did you? I don't know. Hyunjin's stomach tightened. Felix continued. But I remembered someone sitting beside my hospital bed. Who? Felix closed his eyes. He had dark hair. A pause. He kept telling me not to be afraid. Hyunjin's expression softened. What happened to him? I asked everyone about him. And? They said there was nobody. The wind moved through Felix's hair. I thought I imagined him. Hyunjin looked at the box. Until the photographs. Felix nodded. Until the photographs. He opened the box again. One picture showed Felix leaving the hospital. Another showed the mysterious man standing across the street. Another showed Felix months later. Always the same figure. Always watching. Hyunjin picked up one photograph. Why would someone take all these? I don't know. Maybe they're protecting you. Felix shook his head. Maybe. But you don't believe that. No. Why? Felix pointed at the last photograph. Hyunjin looked down. It showed Felix sleeping. His bedroom. His bed. His face. The photograph had been taken from inside the room. Hyunjin's blood ran cold. This was taken recently. Felix nodded. 2 weeks ago. You told us nobody entered the dorm. I know. Hyunjin stared at the picture. Then he noticed something in the background. A small object sat on Felix's bedside table. A wooden music box. He looked at Felix. What's that? Felix frowned. I don't know. It's in your room. I've never seen it. Hyunjin looked again. The music box had a tiny silver symbol carved into its lid. A crescent moon surrounded by 3 lines. Something about it felt familiar. He reached into the box of photographs. Another picture showed the same symbol. Then another. And another. Hyunjin's pulse quickened. This isn't random. Felix nodded. I know. What does the symbol mean? Felix looked toward the city. I've been trying to find out. And? Nothing. Hyunjin picked up his phone. I'll search it. Felix grabbed his wrist. No. Why? Because whoever left these photographs doesn't want us searching online. How do you know? Felix looked at him. Because I already tried. And what happened? My phone received a message. Hyunjin's expression changed. What did it say? Felix slowly took out his phone. The screen displayed an old message. Hyunjin read it. Stop looking for the moon. It remembers you. He stared. What does that even mean? I don't know. Hyunjin looked at Felix. But I think we're supposed to find out. Felix shook his head. No. Felix. No, Hyunjin. His voice cracked. I've spent months trying to understand this. Every answer gives me another question. Every time I get close, something happens. What happened? Felix looked away. I started forgetting things. Hyunjin went silent. What things? Small things at first. Felix swallowed. Places I've been. Conversations I'd had. Names. His eyes became distant. Then I forgot entire days. Hyunjin's chest tightened. Why didn't you tell anyone? Because I was afraid they'd think I was losing my mind. You should have told me. I know. Felix looked at him. That's why I'm sorry. Hyunjin shook his head. Don't apologize. I lied to you. You were afraid. That doesn't make it right. No. Hyunjin paused. But it makes it understandable. Felix looked down. A tear escaped before he could wipe it away. Hyunjin noticed but pretended not to. Instead, he quietly moved closer until their shoulders touched. Neither spoke. For several minutes, the only sound was the wind. Then Felix suddenly whispered, There's one thing I remember clearly. What? The night before I went to the hospital? Hyunjin turned toward him. Felix's expression had changed. I was with that person. Where? Here. Hyunjin looked around. You mean this city? No. Felix pointed toward the horizon. That building. Hyunjin followed his gaze. Several blocks away stood an old hotel. Its upper floors were abandoned. Hyunjin looked back at Felix. You remember being there? Felix nodded. I remember the room. What happened? Felix's face went pale. I don't know. He touched his temple. I remember hearing someone scream. Hyunjin's stomach twisted. Who? Felix closed his eyes. I don't know. A sudden ringing interrupted them. Both looked down. Felix's phone was vibrating. Unknown number. Felix didn't answer. The phone stopped. A second later, a message appeared. Felix opened it. His face immediately changed. Hyunjin leaned closer. There was a photograph. The two of them, standing on the rooftop, taken from behind. Taken only seconds ago. Hyunjin looked.